The Three Sisters is a Native American agriculture practice for growing beans, corn, and squash together in tandem. Each sister supports and is supported by the others so that all may benefit. In the spirit of the Three Sisters, Cowan Community Action Group Incorporated, Cane Kitchen, and the City of Whitesburg Farmers Market work together to grow a healthier and stronger community. Thank you for taking your time to see what is happening in the gardens, kitchens, and markets of our communities.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Cane Kitchen here in Whitesburg, Kentucky. I'm Callie, Blair, and we're here today to do another canning session since we've missed out on our Grow Appalachia canning classes at Cowan Community Center this summer. Today we'll be making a hot pepper relish. We're fortunate enough to have a representative from the Letcher County Extension Office here with us, Nanette Banks. So if you want to just give them a quick idea about what your role at the Extension Office is.
Hello, my name is Nanette Banks. I'm the Family and Consumer Sciences Agent at the Letcher County Extension Office. And like Callie said, we do food preservation workshops at the Extension Office every summer. And this summer with COVID, we have not been able to do that. So we are doing impromptu canning sessions together here at the Cane Kitchen. And we're hoping that you all will enjoy this.
So like I said, today we're making a hot pepper relish. It's a really nice treat to have for an appetizer. You can just kind of spread it over cream cheese and a cracker. It makes a great snack. You can also use it for like a marinade on pork or beef. For our recipe today, we'll be using green and red bell peppers along with jalapeno peppers just to give it a little kick. You want to wear gloves when you're doing this, even in non-COVID times, because if you get this juice on your hands, you will regret it. So
and make sure you wash your hands after you take your gloves off, because you can transfer the capsaicin to your hands, which is the hotness in the peppers.
And then if you rub I've seen people actually get blisters on their skin from that, or rub their eyes, and it's not a fun time. So wear your gloves and your mask. But so we're just gonna get some of these peppers chopped up and stick them in the food processor. And I'm just kind of with these, you want to split them, the jalapenos down the middle, and most of the heat from the pepper is in the seeds. So you want to remove all of the seeds from the inside. And if you don't have a food processor or aren't comfortable with one, you can dice these into small pieces on your own, and the recipe will still turn out and be fine. It's I just think it's a simpler process.
With the food processor, you can just chunk them up into a medium-sized piece and put it in the food processor, and it will finish chopping it for you.
Recipe calls for two green bell, 2 red bell, and 10 jalapenos, and that kind of works out to about 4 cups of pepper chunks when you're finished.
And make sure that you do pre-wash your vegetables and you get nice, pretty peppers that are free of blemishes, and that way you can use those and make sure they are good and washed before you start.
Definitely. Most of these came from our local Whitesburg Farmers Market. We're lucky to be able to just swing by on a Saturday morning and get all that you need for your recipe. I'm gonna fill it. This is just a manual food processor instead of getting out one of the big electric ones. Just a handy little gadget most of the time. How small you chunk your pieces is sort of a personal preference. I like mine to be really small and just kind of blend. No, I don't like a big piece in your bite, especially with the jalapenos. It can get a little spicy if you have a big piece of those in there.
And while you are preparing your recipe, make sure that you do have your canner on the boiling water bath canner on the stove and having the water preheated. Fill your canner half full, and you want to start heating it up to where it is boiling. And that way it takes about 20 to 30 minutes for the water to start the temperature of 180 degrees. So make sure while you are making the recipe that you have your canner half full of water and on the stove getting ready to boil.
And also, before we started this, we washed and sterilized our jars, and they are currently on the stove in boiling water, simmering water, until it's time to fill the jars. There are several different ways of making pepper relish or pepper jelly, kind of depending on what your taste is. I prefer the relish type, but I think Nanette, you said you like the solid jelly.
And what you do is the same process, except you get your peppers, hot peppers and bell peppers, and you put enough vinegar into that, put it into a blender or a food processor and puree it up. And then you cook that and you use the juices from the cooking method, and you don't have any solids on there, and you strain everything. So.
And you mentioned adding the vinegar, which is an ingredient we're putting in a minute, but vinegar is not something you usually think of putting in a sweet relish or a sweet jelly. But that is because of the difference in the pressure canning and the water canning.
Peppers are low acid, so you have to add the acid to it to get the processing where you can do the boiling water bath. And always, if the recipe calls for 1.5 cups of vinegar, make sure you use 1.5 cups of vinegar. Never change the recipe and only do one recipe at a time, and because you don't want to decrease the vinegar or increase the vinegar. And also the vinegar calls for 5% distilled vinegar, so make sure that it is the correct percentage.
And a lot of people, I get a question about, like, a lot of salsa recipes call for vinegar because of the tomatoes and the peppers, and people are worried that it'll make their food taste acidic. But I've never noticed that, so don't try to leave it out because you think, oh, I don't want sour salsa. It won't.
And it doesn't.
It won't affect it. So need 4 cups total of the diced pepper. So this is cup number 4, and we dump all that here in our pot. And the recipe that, I'm going to just dump a little more of that juice in there. The recipe that we're using comes from the Sure Gel box. Each box of this that you buy has recipes for all the different kinds of fruits and jellies and jams. And so and it's the same process for all of those.
The Letcher County Extension Office has a food preservation workbook. If you would like a free copy, call the office at 606-633-2362, and we can get a copy to you in the mail. The booklet will go over anything from boiling water canners to pressure canners, and we do have different recipes. Like this one right here is a golden pepper jelly recipe. And then it goes from anywhere from intermediate to advanced recipes. And this whole booklet has recipes from pressure canning, from vegetables to fruits to jams, jellies to pickles to sauerkraut. So like I said, if you want a copy of this, a free copy, just call the extension office at 606-633-2362, and we'll get one sent out to you in the mail.
That is an excellent resource to have. Even as someone who has candlelight, I always want to double check my recipes and make sure that I'm doing it properly, because canning can be a very simple process. It can be fun, and it's most certainly useful and helpful and fun, but it can also be dangerous. So you want to be sure that you follow the proper procedures to make sure that your foods do not turn bad on yourself. We've got our 4 cups of peppers in the pot here. And we're going to add 1 cup of the 5% acidity vinegar. This is an apple cider vinegar. It is the same as the white distilled vinegar. It's just a little more flavorful, I guess. So we'll pour that in. And then you also add your package of Sure Gel pectin, and that's what will firm up your jam or jelly or relish or whatever it is you're working on. And just kind of stir all that in together. And then we'll put that on the stove and bring it to a boil. And we're going to let that cook and bring it to a full rolling boil, and then we'll add our sugar to the recipe. See how it's boiling around the edges of your pan? You want to wait until there's a full bubble and a rolling boil across the whole pot, and then we'll add our sugar. So our peppers and the juices have come to a full rolling boil now. We have 5 cups of sugar in this bowl. And we're going to dump it into the pot. I'm going to be sure and get it all out. And then you stir that in, mix it all up, and it will lose its boil. Cool it off a little bit. So we have to wait for it to come back to a full. Just get all that stirred in. The pectin, the Sure Gel, is what's causing all that to thicken up. That's what will make your jelly set. Different fruits and different things require different amounts, just depending on the natural pectin that's in them. And this doesn't really have any. Some fruits you can make without adding a pectin. You just have to boil it to longer and for a higher temperature.
So for this right here, you just need to boil it for 1 minute, because it's not going to get thick if you boil it any longer.
Right. So. Good point. So when it comes back to a full boil, we'll start a timer for 1 minute. A lot of times people, when they make jelly, will the next day look at it and it is still runny. That's okay with this one. We want it to stay loose. With grape jelly, you don't want it to be like syrup, but some different ones can take several days to completely firm up. And also, if it never gets firm, you can dump those out, put them back in a pot, and add just more pectin, reboil, and then you would still need to reprocess them in a water bath after that. So it's not always a lost cause.
And as you see, we are keeping our jars in simmering hot water, because you do want to have hot jars when you ladle the jelly into the jars. And it has come back to a boil, so we are timing it now for 1 minute.
And that is rolling.
And you do want to stir constantly.
Okay, so there is our timer.
You need another one?
No, I'll just stretch it over the top. I think it'll reach. Yeah, got it.
And now we're taking the jars out of the simmering water, the hot jars out using a jar lifter. And get all the water out. We do use a jar lifter to get the hot jars out of
We've got our jars out of the boiling water and our jelly has cooked. So we're just gonna ladle it into the jars, and the recipe says to leave about 1/4 inch of headspace. Do you wanna show them the little?
Here's a little tool. That's a bubble remover if you are doing like green beans and stuff on one end, and then it is a headspace tool on the other end. And the 1/4 inch, I think, is the first. Put my glasses on.
So I may need to put
Is
a
the
little.
first, yeah.
Put a little more in those.
So you see right here how easy this is.
Just check it till
Just a little bit more, probably. And that's probably good. So
sometimes it's hard to tell with the funnel down in the jar how full.
and as you can see, it is basically at that top lip here where you're screwing on your bands is about where a 1/4 inch is if you don't have the little handy tool. And I think if I need a little bit more than that, I'm okay. And always make sure that you do use a phone, because that way you won't burn your hands as you're putting this into the small jars.
And we have washed and sterilized our flats and our rings too. These are reusable. These are not. You cannot use these from year to year. They will not get a good seal.
And make sure that you do wash all the jars and the bands and the lids in the hot soapy water. And then if you're going to, if you sterilize your jars, unless that you are going to process 10 minutes or longer and you don't have to sterilize them. And is this, what, at 10 minutes?
Yeah.
And we are processing this at 10 minutes. But on the lids, you do not have to put these in boiling water. Most lids, you do not have to do this anymore. They are newer, and the seal around it can break that down if you do boil them. So just make sure that you do just wash them with hot soapy water and dry them. And like she said, these are not reusable. You have to buy these year to year. The bands you can reuse, and the jars you can reuse. And also on the jars, when you are washing them, make sure that when you wash, you check for nicks and cracks in the jars, because when you do process this, it could break a little more. So make sure that you do check these. And before you put the lids on, make sure you get a damp, clean cloth and you wipe the rims all the way around to make sure that your lid is going to get a good seal.
Especially with stuff like this, because that sticky syrup will just run all over the place.
And you just finger tighten the bands onto the jars. Don't over tighten. Just make sure you just do a finger tight.
And once we get this done, we'll put these in a boiling water bath for about 10 minutes. Not about 10 minutes, 10 minutes. and that will just kill any bacteria that was left on the vegetables, on our hands, on the jar, just to make sure everything is sterile. And a lot of people will say, well, my jar is sealed, so I don't have to do the water bath. But the water bath is not to get the seal, because they will eventually, usually they will just seal if we just stop here, right?
Yes, and you also want to make sure that when you do get these out of the boiling water bath, that when you are able to touch them, make sure that it does not give, the lid does not give, because if it does that, it has not sealed, or if it makes that noise.
Right. I did another ring, sorry.
So now what we're going to do is put them into the boiling water bath. And what you have to do is make sure that the water is boiling, and you put it down in there. And then once you get it in, the jar's in there, you want to go ahead and put 2 to 3 inches of boiling water on top of it. So you want to have 2 to 3 inches of water above the jars.
And then just once it comes back to the boil is when you start your 10 minutes, not just when you want to sit, I'll hold it and you can sit them in. At home, you would do this you can use a pressure canner and the rack in it without the pressure, just with boiling water. Or you can use a water bath canner, which is just a really big pot with a rack in the bottom of it. Yeah. I thought I had it up to, I think a lot of the steam must have, because I had it up to the 10.
And when you put the jars in here, make sure that you pick them straight up and put them straight down and don't tilt them.
So it's just evaporated. So our jars have been in boiling water for 10 minutes and we're ready to take them out.
And remember, when you take them out, you lift them straight up and straight over and place them onto a towel, and you want to space them 1 inch apart. Do not touch these jars for 12 to 24 hours. Let them sit, and then after 24 hours you can test them to see if they have sealed. And like Callie has said earlier, if they have not, you can reprocess at that time.
Popping already. So we'll just carry this whole tray back. So that completes our pepper jelly, pepper relish process. And you would use this same step-by-step directions and process for any jam or jelly that you make. You would just use different amounts of ingredients, be it your juice or vinegar or sugar. That varies based on what you're doing, but it's the same process for each one. So,
and the processing time can vary too.
Right, you just want to follow the recipe as it's presented, either in the ball book, the handy book from the extension office, the Sure Gel recipe. You just want to be sure it's from an accredited institution that's giving you good directions. I don't know if you could hear it, but these jars were already starting to ping when we were sitting them down, but we're going to leave them sitting on this tray for 12 to 24 hours, and then it will kind of look just like this. And you can dump it over your cream cheese and crackers. It's great if you're going to a dinner party. You know, it's a quick appetizer that's ready to go. People love it. We want to thank you for coming, for being part of this. We especially want to thank Cane Kitchen for letting us use their space once again. It's been a great facility to use. It's easy to clean up. Great products come out of here. I thank Nanette for coming with us again. And
if you have any questions about any canning things that you want to know about, you can call me at 606-633-2362. And like I said, if you want a copy of the free book, you just contact our office and we can mail one out to you. And if you have any canning questions, I can ask for me and I can answer those canning questions for you.
And same for me. I'm available on Grow Appalachia and Cowan Community Center's Facebook pages. We want to thank them for sponsoring this and working it all out as a way to still kind of come together this summer, even though we can't all be in the same room and working together the way we enjoy it. But this is, you work with what you've got. So thank you all.